So, Byron, did you know Eskom needs 1.2 trillion rand just to run normally in 2030? Which begs the question, really, will there be a country left come 2024? Because the 1.2 trillion rand to Eskom excludes the water crisis, excludes the literary crisis, excludes the unemployment crisis, excludes the crime crisis, the junk status, the debt. It excludes all of that,
Grey listing.
the grey listing. So you might need like 10 trillion rand just to have South Africa as a country operate normally come 2030. And back of the envelope calculations is that there won't be a South Africa after 2024. Yeah.
So the article goes on to say what actually needs to happen is the existing fleet needs to be taken offline completely and alternatives need to be given in order to run the system. But the only way they can do that is through renewables because they're the easiest to plug into the system. But the cost of doing that, just over 1.2 trillion, man. Like, I don't know where the frick we're going to find that kind of money from.
Well, keyword, you're not going to find it. And here's the problem. South Africa is bankrupt, is on junk status, cannot borrow anymore. In fact, our borrowing cost is one of the biggest things on our balance sheets. It's more than the education budget, as an example. Almost 300 billion rand a year is spent, paying back debt. Sorry, it's raining here. Climate change. Where are we going to get 1.2 trillion just to save Eskom? This is, and I must insist on saying this is just Eskom. This is not Rand Water. This is not the ports. This is not PRASA. This is not our railways. This is not our roads. This is not SAPS. This is only Eskom. 1.2 trillion rand come 2030. Otherwise, there is no power at all. So there have been suggestions. We go to the IMF. IMF gives us 2 trillion rand. The 2 trillion is just basically spent on Eskom. We drop BEE so we can hire the best consultants in the world to fix Eskom as it currently is. What are your chances of the IMF giving us 2 trillion or the ANC banishing BEE to the history books? I'm counting on the latter not happening. Like, BEE will stay with us as long as the ANC stays with us. Simple as that. And the longer BEE stays with us, the more fucked we become as a country.
The problem with BE, and the reason the ANC are not going to get rid of it, is that if you look at it, standard South Africans can look around and see themselves get into poverty more and more and more. They can see the decline in the job market. Now, if you look at it, South Africa doesn't actually have a unemployment problem. It actually has a population problem, and that is the population growth since 1994 has just been exponential. It's just been too much, and the economic growth hasn't kept in pace. So it was bound that at some point in time, the population growth would eventually get to a point where there wouldn't be enough jobs for people. Plus, when you put into account things like the network doesn't work that well, we got labor relations, labor issues, mass immigration, lack of education, the list goes on. Well, the unemployment problem entrenches itself and becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. And therein lies the problem. Everybody can see this. Nobody needs to explain it to you. So the ANC has to have a way of explaining it away. It can't be failure in policy. It must just be that the Wati is holding on to all the jobs and all the money, and that's why they're just not sharing with you. They're just not playing fair. And as long as they kind of use that as a kind of crutch, it kind of diverts the attention away. Because you've got to explain, like, why is this happening? No one wants to say, well, because you've got too many kids. No one wants to say because your education isn't very good. Labor market's too constricted, especially when one of the parties in tripartite alliance is a labor union. So you kind of have to look at that and go, well, what's the explanation? Well, it must be the Wati's fault. I mean, it's the easiest object. But let's just put this into perspective. We need 1.2 trillion rand. South Africa's GDP for the whole country is 301 billion. The amount that Eskom needs is more than our GDP. If we took every single cent in the country and threw it at Eskom, still not enough. So what are you going to do? How are you going to fix it?
And in order to find out how we can fix this, let's first have a word from our sponsor, Bitvice. And we're back. Thank you very much, Bitvice, for sponsoring this video. And by the way, the solution to all these African problems in South Africa is go to the IMF, let the globalists run this country like they have for the past 30 years, or my preferred alternative, balkanize it completely, i.e., cut South Africa out of the equation, break it up into smaller nations, and that's where you can manage the risk best because a smaller nation has a lot more, let's say, homogeneity, a lot more capability to do things, and therefore perhaps the solution to saving South Africa is to just break it up completely into homogenous balkanized states. There is no other choice other than the fact that the IMF gives us 2 trillion, which I think is not really possible.
You know, it's funny because I have a map on my wall in my office, and it's an original map from 1890, and it just shows you how different South Africa looked. Look, I'm not advocating a return back to apartheid or whatever I wish all the black nationalists are going to throw at me. But what it does show you is just how big the bloody place was and how much it took at that point in time to govern this damn place. I mean, even when it was there with all these different provinces, it was actually a really mammoth task to manage this country. It's a huge country. It's nearly bigger than Europe. So, with that being said, would it really be that much of a bad thing to break it up and allow the independent states of South Africa their autonomy in order to be able to govern it? Maybe it doesn't even need to break up in that way. Maybe it just needs to become a federal country. Maybe if we had a constitution a bit more like the US, where the independent like states ran themselves, and there was only just like a figurehead as overall government. That might work better. But the way that South Africa is currently run, can't see it lasting beyond 2024.
No, you can't. And even in 2024, say a new coalition comes in, right? What happens if they go to the IMF and say, listen, we need 2 trillion rand just for Eskom, nothing else, just for Eskom? And IMF says, not a chance. Then what? I mean, the coalition can't even hold Joburg together. Are they going to hold the country together with absolutely no money whatsoever? I have
No.
my sincere doubts about any of these things. So basically, the morning shot recommendation of the day is, or just carry on as we've been saying. Make yourself state proof, be known in your community, help each other, and then sooner or later, hopefully, South Africa will become 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 independent states, and life will be a lot easier when that happens, rather than trying to keep this monolith of socialism together. Just think about it. Every time we had a national government, whether it was the Nats or the ANC, it led to inevitably a fiscal crisis and inevitably to change, which didn't actually create progress. I'm not waiting around for the 4th dispensation of South Africa. I think we should just break it up completely.
We did a vlog last week that went live around community patrols in Cape Town that would go around and look after their own communities. Well, there you go. That's a community-based initiative. You don't need the police. You've got the community doing it. Every person that puts their house on solar, well, there you go. You just had independence from the state. You now state-proof when it comes through to your power. What about all the people that have their own water solutions, water tanks with UV filters feeding into their house? Well, you're now no longer reliant on the grid for your water. Homeschool your kids. Well, you're no longer reliant on the state to have your kids there. Have your own medical aids, or even better, know some doctors who can help you out. There you go. No longer reliance on state hospitals. This is how you do it, right? You don't have to be sitting there having like your own little aranya. Say hello to your neighbors. Learn who lives in your street. Plant your own vegetables. See, it's not hard, man. It's not hard. Just don't give the state all your power. Don't have all of your autonomy listed with the state. Because the reality is, regardless of what country you live in, all global states are currently in trouble. Thanks to hyperinflation, thanks to money printer going brrr, thanks to COVID. Like, all the states in the world are in trouble. So if you're relying on the state, it's a bit like waiting for Superman. You can wait and wait and wait. Superman ain't showing up.
Yeah. And when Superman does show up, he's a Ramaphosa. He's useless. So what's the point?